For this video tutorial, I will be installing Java Development Kit or JDK version 17, NetBeans version 19, and Apache Tomcat version 10. I will be demonstrating how to create a Java Maven Web Application, which will use Jakarta EE 10, version 10. I have a VM set up here with Windows 11. I just have a few applications installed like Google Chrome, 7-Zip, and Notepad++. I will be doing a lot of copying and pasting to speed things up, so feel free to pause the video when you need to. So the first thing I will be doing is downloading everything. So we'll start with NetBeans. So you could just do like a Google search for NetBeans download, but I already have the link right here. So it is netbeans.apache.org/download/index.html. So the latest version as of this video tutorial is 19. So we're going to click the download button. And then we're going to find the installer. Click on this. Get the other ones going. So we're going to be using JDK 17. So I'm going to click JDK 17, and then I'm going to click Windows. And then I'm going to grab the by 64 installer. And you could do a Google search to find this. You could just Google Oracle JDK downloads. And then with the Apache Tomcat, you could just do a Google search for Apache Tomcat download. So we're going to download version 10. And scroll down a little bit and then get this 64-bit Windows zip. I apologize if things run a little slow on my VM. I'm finding Windows 11 uses a lot of resources like memory and stuff like that, and that's my laptop doesn't really have that much memory. So okay, so it looks like the download's completed. So I will just go ahead and close everything out here, and we're going to start off with unzipping the Apache Tomcat zip file. So I'm going to move this to the documents, like a more permanent place. So I'm just going to move it to the documents folder. And then we're going to go navigate in here, go into the config directory, and then we're going to edit this. I like using Notepad++ for some of this stuff. We're going to define users and the password for logging into this Tomcat server. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste what I have in my other monitor in this section here. So basically, I'm just creating, since this is a VM, I plan on wiping this VM out after I'm done with this video tutorial, but the username will be admin, and the password, I'm just going to make passwords. So feel free to change this to a more complex password for your Tomcat server. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'll exit out of there. And it defines like roles for the Tomcat server as well. So, okay, now we're going to install the Java development kit. Just going to go ahead and execute this. So I'm going to just press next to keep it in the program files Java directory. Okay, so it installed successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Something I like to do is just make sure that the Java path is in the path environment variable. So what I'll do is I'll go to the start menu and I'll start typing in advanced. Use advanced system settings. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And then environment variables. I'm going to go down to this path and double click it. So as you can see, the first path is the program files, common files, Oracle Java path. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And then open up a file explorer. Paste it in. So we're going to see the Java and the javac.exe files. Those are the two crucial files that we're going to need. So another way we can check this is logging into the terminal. So I'm going to open up terminal, which is PowerShell. I'm just going to type in Java -s version. And as you can see, in case if you had other versions, like Java versions, we just want to make sure we have this version uh, 17 anyway, the JDK 17. So we're going to go ahead and exit out of here. And then I'll close this out. Press cancel because those are all good. And then I'm going to go ahead and proceed with installing NetBeans. Okay, so I'm going to press next. I'm going to accept the terms in the license agreement and then press next. So this is, it found the JDK directory. So I just want to make sure that's correct. Like I say, if you have multiple JDK versions, just make sure you have the correct version in there. So I'm going to go ahead and press next. and then install. Okay, so the installation completed successfully. It did take a long time, so I had paused the recording. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click finish, and I'll go ahead and close this out, and then I'll run Apache NetBeans. Okay, so one of the first things I start doing is I installed the Apache Tomcat server. So I do want to take a note of the version of Apache Tomcat that we had. So it was that we downloaded 10.1.13. So this way, when you identify the Apache Tomcat server, you can actually put the version in there in case if you have multiple Apache Tomcat versions. It'll just make things easier. Okay, so one of the first things I did was I went into tools and I went into options because I think it's still kind of loading, and I pressed Java, and then it took a while for it to like activate all the modules and everything. So it populated all the modules. So I just basically check each tab and make sure everything's set right. We don't have Java FX installed. I have used Java FX, but for this tutorial, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. So now there's under Tools, there's Servers. So we're going to set up the Apache Tomcat server. So right now there's none. So I'm going to click Add Server. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to click the Apache Tomcat because that's what we downloaded. And I'm going to say the version 10.1.13. So we avoid confusion with multiple versions of Apache Tomcat. I'm going to press Next. Okay, so the server location, we're gonna click the Browse button. And we're gonna select this folder right here and click Open. And then we're gonna put our credentials in that we used earlier in the tomcat-users.xml file. So that was admin, and then because this is a VM, I just chose password as the password. So yours will be a lot more complex, hopefully. So I'm going to click Finish. And then I'll go ahead and close. So um, one thing we want to do is just go through every tab and just make sure like the correct JDK is selected here. You may have multiple versions of JDK, so just select JDK 17. And then I go through the other tabs and just make sure everything looks right. Close. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And that can be done by either pressing this icon right here. So if you hover over it, it'll say New Project. Or you can go to File, press New Project, or you can press Control-Shift N. So I'm going to say new project. And then I'm going to, under Java with Maven category, I'm going to select web application, press next. So you can call this whatever you want. I'm just going to keep everything default. Um, since this is the first project on this VM, I'll just keep it as Maven Project 1, and then I'll have it go to the documents directory, and you can change your group ID to whatever company you have. I'm just going to keep it mycompany.com, or well, com.mycompany. So I'm just going to keep everything as is, and then press next. Make sure the Apache Tomcat server is selected, the correct one. And by default, it's selected Jakarta EE 10 web. So we're going to use that. We're going to go ahead and click finish. So as you can see, it built the successful project. If you just let it, if you leave it alone, it'll actually automatically add the navigation panes on the left side. So I'll just wait for that. Okay, well, the background scanning of projects is going on. I'm just going to go ahead and expand this, um, just so you can kind of see what files it created. So as you can see, there's the JDK 17. Here's our pom.xml file. This is a very important file that's in all Java Maven Web Applications. And then it creates a index.html file. Pretty basic HTML. We're going to change this to a JSP eventually. So one thing I like to do is go into the properties of the project and just make sure everything's all configured and set up properly. So I'll go through each of these categories. So I'm going to change this to 17 since we're using JDK 17. Again, you want to make sure you have the correct JDK selected. If not, you can select the correct option from the dropdown. So I'm going to change this to Chrome. Again, these are, it came up with the default of Jakarta EE 10 web. So so I'm just going to keep it like that. And it's using the correct Apache Tomcat server. I don't have any other servers here. So I'm going to keep all this stuff as is. Looks like everything else is good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Okay, so one of the most important files is this POM XML file. So I'm going to go ahead and double click it to edit it. Like if you encounter errors when running the application, sometimes it might be due to an out of date dependency or plugin. So if so, it may be necessary to update those. So NetBeans has a nice feature so that while you're typing in the version in this pom.xml file, it will show what versions are available. So this can be done, like for instance, here. in the build section, like if I wanted to make sure that this plugin was correct, I can backspace all the way and then maybe start typing in, and then it'll show the available versions. So like if there's a 3.3.3, it would show up and you can just click on that. That's if you run into any issues. That's what I've seen in the past. Sometimes just it's an out of date plugin or whatever, and I would just make sure I put in the correct version. Maybe you have an older version of NetBeans. So sometimes that's a useful thing. So that completes the installation and setup. So now we're going to actually perform a test run of the application just to make sure everything works fine. So just with this index.html. So it's just going to print out hello world. Pretty basic. Again, we won't worry about JSPs quite yet because there's some things we need to do as far as JSPs. So even though it may have built this project, I recommend getting in a habit of anytime you make changes or whatever to run this clean and build project icon. This can also be ran from here, or you can press Shift 11. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again, just in case if we were looking at the properties and it changed something or whatever. So okay, so the build was successful. So now we can run it. We can either do it by pressing this icon right here, or we can the keyboard shortcut is F6 to run the project, so we can run it here. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it from here. So uh, NetBeans will automatically start the Apache Tomcat server. So that's something kind of nice about NetBeans is it'll automatically do this. So you don't have to do this from the Apache Tomcat server. They have batch files in there like to start it. This will automatically take care of it. With these, we're going to allow access. I'm just going to say private because this is a private network. Okay, so this is it's going to ask for the credentials that we put in there. So we should see when this pops up, it should say hello world. So that means it's successful. So that's good. Now we're going to go ahead and change the index.html file to a JSP so we can add dynamic content to that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Something about JSPs is there's a tag lib that you can add for doing if statements in the JSP files, which I find is very useful. But finding the URI, I've had some issues with in the past. So I want to show you guys how to do this. Basically, what we'll be doing is we'll be going to the Jakarta website, which is this right here. So it's Jakarta EE/specifications. And then, so we're using the Jakarta EE web profile, and we're using 10, version 10. So we can click on this. And then I'm going to click the Jakarta web profile 10 specification document. You can do HTML or PDF, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to scroll all the way down to the related documents. And I'm going to look for the Jakarta standard tag library specification. And that's what I want to go into. So you can click this. And another way we can do this, which may be an easier way, is we can go into this. So this is jakarta.ee/specification/tags. And because we're using Jakarta EE10, we're going to be using the JSTL 3.0. So we can just click here. So as you can see, these are the same locations, so it just might be easier doing it that way. So I really find this pretty useful. I would maybe bookmark this documentation. Okay, so I'm going to do a search for URI and then click until you find the multiple tag library section. So this is very important right here. So we're going to be using this as the URI when we add our tag lib. Let me show you what that looks like. So our tag lib is going to look something like this, but we want to make sure we have the correct URI. And this is where you would get that from. So it depends on the version of Jakarta. So the story behind Jakarta is it used to be called J2EE, then it became Java EE, and now it's Jakarta EE. So this is the latest and greatest, but this is a good way to see what the URI tag is, because sometimes if you have the wrong URI, it'll say cannot resolve, and you'll get the error. I think when you compile it. So this is how we're going to get the URI. It took me a while to figure this out. I'm not an advanced programmer, so I'm just kind of still exploring things. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So we're going to have to add some dependencies to make this work. I did a trial run, and this is just what is needed to make this happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Google Chrome, and we're going to go into the Maven repository, and that's located here. So it's mvn repository.com/artifacts/org.glassfish.web/jakarta.servlet.jsp.jstl. I recommend bookmarking this as well because you will find a lot of useful information in here about dependencies and stuff like that. So in here, I want to select the latest version, which is 3.01, and I'll go ahead and uncheck include comment with link to declaration. So I do have my pom.xml file. Go back to here, and then what I'm going to do is I have since this is Maven, I want to make sure uh, the Maven tab is selected. Okay, so I'm going to copy this to the pom.xml file, and all I need to do after unchecking this is just click on here, and it'll automatically copy it to the clipboard. So I'm going to go up here and paste this in. Okay, so that's the latest in that. So now what I'd like to do is make sure all these other dependencies, so scroll down to the provided dependencies section, and we have to install these. So I always get the latest version, so what I do is I'll right click and open a new tab for each of the latest versions. And then what I'll do is I'll go to each thing, dependency, dependency, click on it, so it copies to the clipboard, and also paste this in. And we just want to make sure that none of these repositories are already in here. So like this one's platform, and then Jakarta EE API. This one's L API. This one's servlet API, JSP API. So as long as we don't have any duplicates, we should be good. I'll get this last Maven repository here. Okay, so and now we have the JSTL API dependency, so should be good there. So it would look something like this. I just uh, press tab every time I paste it, or when I highlighted. That way they're all aligned. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start creating our JSP. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and delete the index.html. And then I'm going to click right click web pages. I'm going to say new, and we're going to click JSP, but let's just say if JSP wasn't in this part, you can go to other, and you'll find it under the web categories under JSP. So we'll just go ahead and click JSP, and then we're going to call it index.jsp, and just go ahead and click finish. Okay, so it created that this. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and copy this. I'm going to go ahead and paste this right below here. So I'm going to change the body to just, like I say, I'm going to be copying and pasting just to make this easier. So if you want, you can pause this video. I'll scroll to the right a little bit. Actually, I'll just move this in toward, that way you can see it. You can pause it if you want. This is just going to create, basically if there's, so here's the way the tag lib works. So it does a prefix of C, and then here's the URI that we were talking about earlier. So it's going to allow, so there's C colon if statements that you could do, and you have to do test equals, and then we're going to see if there's a user string. If it's empty, or if it's not empty, like in this case, then it's going to basically print, it's going to put a logout, because we're going to create a logout servlet, but it's just going to create a link to log out. And it's also going to display in the center, it's going to say welcome whoever the username is. Now, if it is empty, if that user string is empty, then it's actually going to put a table in there to enter your name in, and then with a submit button. So it's kind of like a login, basically. But this is really just a simple um, login application, I guess. There's no databases. Just so I'm going to go ahead and add in my CSS code. I'll put that underneath the title. What I can do is put this in Notepad++, so you can look at the, you could pause the video, and so that's the CSS. I'll create a new one for the actual JSP. All right, so I'm going to go back here. So right now this shows an error, but I think when we actually compile this, this error will go away, and it should work properly. Okay, so now we're going to add the servlet. So what we're going to do is right click here and say new, and then servlet. Again, if this is not here in this uh, most commonly used, I think that's the most commonly used applications. You can go into other, and under web you'll see servlet. So we're going to create a servlet. Just double click. And we're going to name this welcome servlet. Go ahead and press next. And then we'll change this so that we'll do welcome. And then I want to add this information to the web XML file. I think this will be useful, especially if you have multiple JSPs and you want to figure out what the the actual URLs for each web page are versus looking at each servlet. So I recommend doing it this way. You may have your own preferences. You can uncheck that if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish. Okay, so you're going to notice this is going to pop up with some errors because we're using Jakarta EE, not Java EE. So those import statements are going to pop up with errors any moment now, because we gotta we're gonna change Java FX to Jakarta, and that will eliminate those errors. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. Changing this. Okay, so it got rid of the errors. So NetBeans creates this process request method. I'm just going to go ahead and expand everything else. So it also has the do get. So the do get and the do post, they all run this process request method. But we're going to go ahead and delete this method because we're going to put in our own code in. So I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this as well. So for our do get method, I just want it to redirect to the index.jsp file, which is going to be our home page. So this is the way you would do that. Response.send redirect and then request.get context path. And with our do post, so the HTTP session just needs a import. So what I did was I clicked on this light bulb with the red error icon, and then you can click add import. So that was the Jakarta import. Okay, so basically right here I'm just creating a string called username, and I get that whatever's in the index.jsp file. So like, I'll just scroll down. So whatever somebody enters in that input, in this input of the JSP file, I'm labeling as username. So it's grabbing from this variable, and then it's going to store it in a local variable called username as well. And then the session gets the session, and then we're just going to set a variable for that session. So that way it's going to be the same session throughout the entire process. So we'll be able to transfer this username. So we're going to set the attribute, and we're going to set the variable as user, and then it'll be the username. And then what we're going to do is just redirect it again to the home page, which is the index.jsp file, because it's going to go through these if statements and it's going to see, okay, if it's not empty, then it's going to say welcome whatever your name is that you submitted. And then, but if it is empty, then it's going to put that um, that table to enter in your name. So that's the welcome servlet, and we'll go ahead and create the logout servlet. Let's go ahead and save this. Again, you would right click this and say new servlet, and we're going to call this logout servlet. Press next, and we're going to say logout, and then we're going to add the information to the web XML file. And I'll show you this web XML file so you can take a look at it. Again, it's airing out with the Java X. So we're just going to change that to Jakarta. So that gets rid of the errors. We'll go ahead and save it. Okay, so I just want to show you the web XML file, which is located under web INF. You just double click this. So here's where you can see like the links. So if you ever need to change these, you can just change them right here. This has the correct links for the Jakarta EE instead of the Java EE. So that way it's going to look at the right spots. So this is automatically generated when we created the project. So with the welcome servlet, with the logout servlet, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that process request method again because we don't need it. So the only method we're going to use here is the doGet. We don't have to worry about the doPost, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And this get servlet info. And I'm just going to change this to this. So, and then I'll import the Jakarta servlet HTTP session. Again, this is getting that session, and then it'll set the attribute to null once you log out. So as soon as we click the link to log out, it'll run this doGet method and it'll set the user variable to null, and then it'll redirect to the home page, which this is the request.get context path will always be the home page. We got the logout servlet. We'll go ahead and save this. That way we don't have any errors. So I'll build and install. Okay, so the build was successful. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this. So this actually went to our JSP page. I was actually expecting it to go to our index.html file. But if it did go to, like if it did say hello world here, what we can do, let me just go ahead and close these out. We don't need those anymore. So if it did say hello world, what you can do is go to settings. and you can go to privacy and security, go to clear browsing data, and then you can click on everything here. I mean, this is up to you. So I'm going to clear the data. And like I say, this is if you see like the index.html populating with hello world. You don't need to do this. Okay, so if you want, you can close this, and let's say you want to rebuild it, you can rebuild it. I'm just going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so this is our application. So if I put in Grant and I press enter, it says welcome Grant, and here's the log out button, so you can log out. Again, it will just go back to the home page right here. So you can enter. I mean, this is like I said, this is a very basic log in, log out kind of sort of thing. I don't have a database. You would have, like, if you wanted to connect the database, you'd add the, like, MySQL, for example, you would add the connector, JDBC connector for MySQL, and then you can add that stuff. But this is just to show you how to install a Java Maven Web Application using NetBeans IDE. You can use any other IDE. I'm just using NetBeans because I'm more familiar with it. Um, and then this is using Jakarta EE version 10 and JDK version 17. So that completes this video. I hope this helps people.